Today we'll start a new topic, that is copyrights. And regarding copyrights, so the first question regarding copyrights that we have framed define copyright and discuss on infringement and the guidelines for measuring infringement. And so the very definition of copyright is as provided under section 14 of the Copyright Act 1957. Generally, two important human senses such as seeing and hearing, which both affects by the creation of certain works, and such works which affects these two senses are cinematography, films, artistic works, dramatic works, computer software, commercial design works, sound recordings, musical works, dramatic works, broadcast, satellite, and cable programs, such as also literary works. All these created works of authors, composers, publishers, producers, distributors, playwrights, singers, etc. So, the very definition of copyright is a bundle of exclusive rights granted by law to the creators of literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, and the producers of cinematography, films, sound recordings, computer software to do or authorize the doing of certain acts with regard to their creations. It is a kind of protection against unauthorized use of a work. Copyright is usually defined as the legal rights granted to an author, composer, playwright, publisher, or distributor to exclusive publication, production, distribution, or of a literary, musical, dramatic, or artistic or original commercial design work. Similarly, issue of intellectual property right arises automatically on the creation of various categories of work and protecting the rights and interests of creators on literary, dramatic, musical, artistic works, sound recordings, films, broadcast, satellite, cable programs, and all such arrangement of public editions. So, now after defining copyright, now we'll see exactly what infringement of copyright means. So, section 51 provides about infringement of copyright, which we deal such as sale or hire of any such work and its production or production and distribution, publication, trade displays, imports into India, also trade exhibits in public. So, as per Section 51 of Copyright Act 1957, copyright is a work shall be deemed to be infringed when any person without a license granted by the owner of the copyright or the registrar of a copyrights under the act or in contravention of the conditions of a license so granted or of any condition imposed by a competent authority under the act does anything, the exclusive right to do which is by this act conferred upon the owner of the copyright or permits for profit any place to be used for the communication of the work to the public where such communication constitutes an infringement of the copyright in the work unless he was not aware and had no reasonable ground for believing that such communication to the public would be an infringement of copyright, or when any person makes for sale or hire or sells or lets for hire or by way of trade displays or offers for sale or hire or also distributes either for the purpose of trade or to such an extent as to affect the owner of the copyright or by way of trade exhibits in public or by importing to India any work or creation of any author or creator or publisher or producer of any such work into India without due permission of such author or composer or publisher or in contravention of the provisions of Section 51 of the Copyright Act would be considered as infringement. And now we'll see all those enforcement measures that were taken by the state. So, the first one is relating to a handbook of copyright. The government brought out a handbook of copyright law to create awareness about copyright amongst the shareholders, enforcement agencies, professional users like the scientific and academic communities and members of the public. So also the second enforcement measure relating to National Police Academy, National Academy for Customs, Excise and Narcotics have conducted several training programs on copyright for the training programs on copyright for the police and customs officers. And the third one, that is relating to the Copyright Enforcement Advisory Council, which is under the Department of Education, Ministry of Human Resources Development, has initiated several measures in the past for strengthening the enforcement of copyrights that include constitution of a copyright enforcement advisory council, creation of separate cells in state police headquarters, encouraging setting of collective administration societies and organization of seminars and workshops to create greater awareness about copyright law among the enforcement personnel and the general public. So, the Copyright Enforcement Advisory Council is reconstituted from time to time to review periodically the progress of enforcement of Copyright Act and to advise the government on measures for improving the enforcement. And so also special cells for copyright enforcement have so far been set up in 23 states and union territories in India. And another important enforcement measure is that for collective administration of copyright societies have been set up for different classes of works. At present, there are 3 registered copyright societies in India. One is Society for Copyright Regulation of Indian Producers of films and television for cinema, photography, films, and the second such copyright society in India is Indian Performing Rights Society Limited for musical works. And the third such copyright society in India is the Pornographic Performance Limited for sound recordings. These societies, particularly the Phonographic Performance Limited and the Indian Performing Rights Society Limited, have been quite active in anti-piracy work. The Pornographic Performance Limited has been set up a special anti-piracy cell under a retired Director General of Police, and this cell has been working with the police. And the next enforcement measure could be the government also initiates a number of seminars, workshops on copyright issues. The participants in these seminars include enforcement personnel like the police as well as the representatives of industry organization. And the last most important enforcement measure is creation of general awareness. Several other measures to create general awareness about copyright and encouraging study of intellectual property rights in the educational systems. Besides modernizing the copyright office or the other important enforcement measures taken by the government to enforce these measures to control piracy and infringement of such copyrights as provided under Section 51 of the Copyright Act 1957. So, as per this question number 1, define copyright. So, we define what exactly constitutes copyright as per the provisions of Section 14. So, all those creations or creative works by those authors, composers, publishers, producers, distributors, playwright, singer, etc., and that is regarding such creations relating to cinematography, films, artistic works, dramatic works, musical works, sound recordings, dramatic works, and also broadcast and commercial design, computer software, literary works, satellite and cable programs, all these are falling under what exactly copyright constitutes. So, any violation or any reproduction or sale, hire, or publication or distribution or trade displays or trade exhibits in public, all these constitutes as infringement of copyright as provided under Section 51. So, this is the second part of the question discussed on infringement, and the last part regarding guidelines for measuring infringement that we have discussed under enforcement measures, such as exactly a handbook of copyright law to provide all guidelines regarding copyrights, also the very training programs for National Police Academy, National Academy of Customs, Excise and Narcotics, and also the creation of Copyright Enforcement Advisory Council by the Department of Education, Ministry of Human Resources, and creation of special cells. So also, by establishing copyright societies that we have discussed, three important copyright societies that formed regarding the very enforcement of measures, that copyright societies as Society for Copyright Regulations of Indian Producers of Films and Televisions, and the second source Copyright Society is the Indian Performing Rights Society Limited for musical works, And the third such copyright society is the Pornographic Performance Limited for sound recordings and also the holding of regular seminars and workshops on copyright, and lastly creation of general awareness under the very authority of government in different educational institution by creating general awareness regarding intellectual property right, and of which Copyright Act of 1957 is an integral part of intellectual property right. So, in our second question relating to copyright that we have framed is relating to question number 2, and that is make a critical assessment of Copyright Act 1957, which will deal in our upcoming video.